Hi, and welcome back to Radio ATN at the 2023 Creating Trauma Sensitive Schools Conference. I am here with the lovely Kerrie Ackerson, who is here in official capacity as a sponsor with HELPme. However, I serendipitously ended up at a lunch table with you yesterday in search of silverware, and I eavesdropped a little bit on your conversation, and your story is phenomenal as far as stories go for people who come into this work. Where do you want to start? I mean, what stood out to me was you said that you showed up.
So I have the luxury of learning over the past 5 years from a beautiful young man who serendipitously turned up in my life. All my life, when something has been unfair, I have had a bit of a trauma response to that, and I didn't really understand it until I did the work
I have chill bumps
of the last 5 years.
Like that's how we're starting this.
But I was doing a training at my former high school, at my hometown high school, and something was happening on the football field, and it turned out that a young man was being arrested. And since the superintendent and the principal and a lot of administrators were in the training, we had to take a break. And so I asked them a little bit about what was going on, and they shared that the young man didn't have contact with his parents, and that he had done something that he could be in trouble for. They did know about it already. And I said, what's going to happen with him? He had been sleeping on the couch of the homeless coordinator for the district. And I just felt like there's injustice. And then I had this response, like I have to do something. And so I knew he was going to jail. And so I went to the jail and talked to these people from my hometown who were all from my high school, which was different after you moved away and then you go back. And now the people you went to high school with are the superintendent of the school and the sheriff. And it's really strange because I still look at them as freshmen. You know,
Yeah,
you remember everyone.
You
remember everyone when you were a senior.
Yeah.
Where were they? Like you were in 8th grade. You'll always be that. I know you're the sheriff now, but really. So I followed this young man, and the homeless coordinator had to go out of town, and she said, I can't be there for him. And I said, I'm familiar with the juvenile justice system. My background is in children's mental health, children in incarceration. And so I said, I'll go to the jail and I will go to his court hearing, and I felt that was a normal and natural thing to do. And so when I stood up in court with my husband and I said, we want people to know that we'll take custody of this young man, and we will, make sure he gets back to court and he's welcome in our home. He had never seen me before. And he didn't know who I was. So you can imagine how strange it was for him.
Yeah.
But I really felt like this person needed a backstop in his life. He just didn't have anyone. And so something kind of propelled me. And at the time, I didn't know what that was. We'll get to what it really was later. But so we offered him our home. And after a short time, he did come and live with us. And I found out that he had been living in his car for a period of time, and then couch surfing for a period of time, and then not eating on the weekends because just of the situation at his school where accessing the food pantry, which was a great food system that they had, required him to go to an elementary school and pick up a children's backpack.
Oh, okay.
And he just wouldn't do it. And so he just didn't eat his whole, I think, sophomore year. He didn't eat on the weekends. And he played football, and he's a very big kid, 6'2", needs some calorie intake, right? And so anyways, I just got to know him, and I follow people online that I look up to. And some of those people include Dr. Bruce Perry, Jim Sporleader, who's here at this conference. And I worked in an educational service agency at the time. So I was following kind of people who work in educational service agencies who work in the area of trauma, and lots of good people online who had no idea who I was. But when this young boy came to live in my home, my biggest concern was that I was going to further his trauma because I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so I put out just kind of a strange call on Twitter, and I said, you don't know me, but I am someone who follows all of you because of your views on trauma-informed care for children. And I have this young man, a teenager, in my home. I know he's gone through terrible things in his life, and I just don't want to hurt him. And can anybody help me? Can anybody give me any guidance?
And they showed up.
And they showed up. And so I got responses from several people, including and especially Jim Sporleader, who wrote a book about trauma-informed schools, and Dr. Bruce Perry. And they together helped me understand the teenage brain and sent books for my son and I to read together and learn together. And we went through this trauma journey. And my son really fit into our extended family well. And so my family, my sisters and my mother, they thought they should read the books as well. And I'm talking about The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog by Dr. Perry, and then What Happened to You, his most recent book, and also Bessel van der Kolk's Body Keeps the Score. And so as we read these books as a family, we started to kind of understand that we needed to speak as a family about our own trauma in order to be in a good space to help this young man and welcome him into our family. So that's how we met. It was about a year before COVID. And like I said, as you can tell now I call him my son. He is my son. And so just that act of showing up and helping me learn spread to my family and spread to us really dealing with some trauma of our own that helped me understand why I had such a strong and sometimes inappropriate response when somebody was going through something that I felt was fundamentally unfair.
Okay, and so let's go to what you do now.
Okay.
Because you turned your experience inside out, you grew from it, and now you've turned it into something outward to help even more people.
So as we started processing this and going through the process of getting my son the assistance he needed and supports he needed, I realized how fundamentally difficult it was to get resources. End of sentence.
Yeah.
How hard it is not only to ask for help. I was comfortable doing that, right? I'm an adult. I had time.
That was something I want to get back. I'm going to put a little bookmark in asking for help, because you said something really profound about that yesterday.
And so I felt comfortable, very comfortable. I'd sit on the phone, I'd be on hold, I'd be doing other things. I had the luxury and the privilege of having the time, of having the regulation. But the point is, I still couldn't get him the resources he needed. I'm an adult, I'm an educated person, I'm committed to doing this, I have the time, and I failed. And that was deeply upsetting. And it wasn't deeply upsetting because we couldn't get what he needed, but I really felt like I should be able to work the system because I worked for a county, I've worked for nonprofits. And so I really felt like I should be able to use the system that I had worked in my life. And I wasn't able to, and I failed. So that was just, that was a seed, right? Like, that's a fundamental injustice. If we have resources, and I know they exist, but people in need can't get them, what do they hear when they try and they're on hold for an hour and 40 minutes? And then someone says, oh, you need to write a letter for that. What do they hear? What do they learn about asking for help? The tone in people's voice that you have to call in order to get food stamps, or even ask questions about food stamps. What do we hear? And so I started to think about that, because again, I had the luxury of being a regulated adult and being able to think with my cortex
Yeah.
about how does this affect other people who don't have all of the privilege that I have. So that was the beginning kind of a seed of an idea. And at the time I was working for, I was working for an educational service agency. And educational service agencies exist in 48 states. They're sometimes called intermediate units. In New York, they're called BOCES. They're called ISDs, all sorts of different things in states. But their whole purpose is to really help our smaller schools get the same level of resources as our larger schools, even if that resource has to be split. Mm-hmm. So service agencies are great. I know you just talked to one in SDAC out of Kansas. And so I was trying to get them to be more entrepreneurial when it came to issues of school safety, because I knew that in 2016, even I knew there were vendors circling. This is an area that is growing. And if we, the people who serve schools, don't take this over, schools are going to be driven and boards are going to be driven by fear. And, vendors will come in, they plant fear in the board, and the board says to the superintendent, do something. Well, what's the easiest thing to do? Something. Put up a fence, put up cameras, something visual, right? Mm-hmm. You can see. That's called customer perceived value. And I thank my friend who goes by the safety doc, follow him on Twitter, for really talking about that at length in his book, The School of Errors. And it's really about this $5 billion school safety industry that is built around fearing children, primarily children who have gone through trauma.
And is leaving your son in the back of his car going hungry on the weekend because he doesn't want to go to an elementary school to get a little kid backpack for food.
Right.
So then how has HELPme come in to bridge that gap?
So I was contracting for this anonymous reporting company, fantastic company. They had their development team in-house. They take feedback from the field and would update their app. They were just really agile. They're small. And I just felt like, wow, if they're taking feedback from rural superintendents in Wisconsin, I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And so they're called Stop It Solutions. And I was helping them work with educational service agencies across the country in the area of school safety. I didn't really have any feelings about anonymous reporting. The Secret Service had come out with a paper that said anonymous reporting was one of the evidence-based things you could do for school safety. And that's great. I'm not sure that we should take scientific findings from the Secret Service, but I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So an anonymous reporting has shown when kids feel comfortable to reach out and say something, they will. When they feel comfortable to reach out, they will. So when we were looking at the Stop It data that I had access to, about 85% of the tips coming into the tip app were young people asking for help for themselves or a friend, young people cutting, young people who were worried a friend was going to commit suicide. These are not the types of incidents that need to go through the behavioral threat assessment process. Mm-hmm. These are requests for help. And so I thought, instead of a tip app that overwhelmingly takes in requests for help, we could do a help app that can also handle a crisis. And the company was Stop It, and I'm not super creative, so I just did HELPme. And I said, could we do this? And I was very lucky that the CEO of the company, Park Hill Mays, said, you can do that. And so I did, with the help of my son, my non-binary niece, and all of my former foster children, who I realize now taught me everything I know about the human experience.
So you've been set up perfectly to be where you are at this moment.
So lucky.
That is what I think the theme of this conference is, and what I'm so excited when people are able to come, is they're able to make these connections that you were able to make online and then come make them in person. and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And it's going from something as simple as trauma informed to now what you do and how many lives will you affect. And it's
the connections. I encourage everyone to come to this conference, because a year ago tomorrow, I sat in a room with 15 people, 15 speakers that I had invited out. I had never met them. I had only Twitter stalked them, and I'm sure it was fairly creepy for them. But I sat in a room with them to get to know them. And now I can say that literally everyone in that room is not just a friend, but is someone I could go to on my worst day. And I am 100% confident they would be there for me. And that is really the type of people that are everywhere here. Yeah. You are in community here and you feel it and it energizes you. And so I encourage people to come, be in community. It rejuvenates you. And teachers and counselors and social workers are the people who have the hard jobs. I was not brave enough to be a teacher. My sister was. And so I value that. It's a difficult job every day. I understand that it's scary, and I wasn't brave enough to do it, but I want to support them in any way that I can. And if I can help to regulate kids, I think that's a great way to support them.
Yeah, so much of it is just recognizing you have a strength of connection. And so many people out here, we talked earlier about, before we were talking about, you don't have to have a PhD in neuroscience to do this work. It can be a bus driver. It can be the lunch lady. It can be any one of those people. You don't have to have a huge background educationally. You just have to know your strength.
And I work with Dr. Bruce Perry in the Neurosequential Network now. And when he said to me, when he started to talk about therapeutic moments, and Dr. Lori talked about that, about therapeutic moments, and talked about Dr. Perry this morning, it occurred to me that when I was a young person, I had a lot of those. So I had a sibling that was killed when I was 7. And my siblings and all of my siblings were older. And it was my oldest brother who was killed. And I was out of school for a period of time. And then I went back to school, and I had been kind of a precocious young person. But when I returned to school at age 7, everything was frightening. I cried when I had to go on the bus. I cried when I was alone. I now was afraid of the dark. I didn't understand why I was crying all the time. Every day I cried until I threw up. I didn't understand any of these things. I didn't have the words. And nobody was talking about it. And my parents were obviously in grief.
Yeah.
In their own way. And so I wasn't able to really understand this until I went back after reading about how people heal from trauma. And I remember my bus driver, who now I know was 22 or 23 at the time. I'll never forget his name. His name was Luke Kohler. And hopefully he'll hear this. But I remember the first day back, I was crying at the end of my driveway. And he said, come on, it's okay. You can stand by me. You can hold on to my shirt. I'm going to get you to school, and I'm going to be there on your way home, and it's all going to be okay. And that's how it was for that year. And I would get to school and I would cry. And my teacher, who was 4'10" and just an angel and has now passed, Doris Hazen, she would put her arm around me, even though I was crying and snotty, and she would say, it's okay. It's okay to cry. I'm right here. It's fine. And she would just teach the class with an arm around me. And after a while, I would cry so hard, and you get all gunky in your stomach. And I would go outside the classroom, but suddenly I was afraid of the bathroom. In my old Catholic school, it was very long and thin, so there was, the stalls. I was afraid of everything, and so I would open the bathroom door, and then I would throw up in the hallway. And the custodian would come out, and he'd say, "It's okay. It's okay. We're just going to sprinkle this minty sawdust on it, and it's totally okay." And I didn't realize at the time that it was those therapeutic moments. The day that the office lady, I got a different colored lunch ticket, which I now understand was because I was now eligible for free lunch. But my lunch ticket color changed. Something as simple as that. I cried inconsolably, and I asked her why I was being punished. And she just gave me the regular color one and just about all of these little things, going to the nurse's office and having her say, maybe if you lay down and I rub your back, that will make you feel better. Again, all these kind, regulating touches, safe touches. It was the 70s.
Yeah, that is,
There was no
been set up.
Yeah, there was no trauma informed. These were people who loved children and who understood this is how we can make it better. I didn't understand it. I was blessed that they were around me. And I have to say that not all of my siblings had that same experience.
Yeah. And now you're expounding it and bringing it forward, and you're here, and we're so thankful to have you here.
I am so thankful
Thank
to
you
be
for
here.
coming to tell your story.
Thank you
And
for
then
having
thank
me.
you for your sponsoring tonight's event.
Yes.
And there will be a lot more information at the event tonight if you're able to attend. If not, we have a link to your work. And
StopItSolutions.com/HELPme.
yes. Kerrie, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching, and we will see you with our next guest on Radio ATN.